Picture this. You're watching TV in 1995 and a Pepsi commercial comes on. A teenager grabs his leather jacket, puts on some sunglasses, walks outside, and climbs into a freaking military fighter jet that lands in his driveway. The screen flashes, Harrier fighter jet, 7 million points. Most people laughed. One college student named John Leonard did the math instead, and what he discovered almost cost Pepsi $23 million. This is the insane true story of how a broke college kid nearly forced one of America's biggest corporations to hand over a military aircraft. And it all started with a really bad marketing decision. 1995 was peak cola wars. Pepsi was throwing everything at Coca-Cola, including this massive campaign called Pepsi Points. Collect points from Pepsi products, get cool prizes, standard loyalty program stuff. But Pepsi's marketing team decided to get creative. They made this commercial showing a teenager's morning routine, but instead of taking the school bus, this kid flies a military Harrier jump jet to class. 7 million Pepsi points for a fighter jet. Ha ha, very funny, right? Except here's what Pepsi didn't think through. They had fine print saying you could buy points directly, 10 cents per point. So 7 million points equals $700,000. A real Harrier jet, $23 million. That's when John Leonard, a 21-year-old business student, realized Pepsi had just advertised the deal of the century. The plan now, John didn't have $700,000 sitting in his college dorm room, but he had something better, the audacity to actually try this. He convinced a wealthy businessman to invest in what had to be the craziest business plan ever pitched. Let's buy a fighter jet from Pepsi. They studied Pepsi's rules like they were planning a heist. You needed at least 15 points from actual Pepsi products to make any purchase. So John bought $4,000 worth of Pepsi, enough to fill a small warehouse, just to get those 15 points. Then came the big moment. March 1996, John Leonard mailed Pepsi an order form and a check for $700,008.50, requesting delivery of one Harrier fighter jet to his address in Seattle. Can you imagine being the Pepsi employee who opened that envelope? 3 weeks later, John got Pepsi's response, and it was pathetic. Dear Mr. Leonard, thank you for your interest in our commercial. The Harrier jet was not part of our catalog. It was used for comedic effect. Please enjoy these Pepsi coupons. They sent him coupons. This man just tried to buy a military aircraft, and they sent him discount coupons like he'd complained about a flat soda. But John wasn't backing down. He wrote back, "Your commercial was a legal offer. I accepted it according to your rules. Where's my jet?" Pepsi's response was basically, "Dude, it was obviously a joke. No reasonable person would think we're giving away fighter jets." That's when John Leonard hired lawyers and took Pepsi to federal court, because apparently John Leonard was not what Pepsi considered a reasonable person. If you're enjoying this corporate chaos, hit subscribe to Business Vault for more wild business scandals. Leonard v. PepsiCo became the legal case everyone was talking about. John's argument was bulletproof. They made an offer with specific terms. I met those terms. They owe me a jet. Pepsi's defense was, well, let's just say their lawyers earned their money. First, they argued the commercial was obviously humorous. They said no reasonable person would believe Pepsi was actually giving away military equipment. They brought up government regulations, flight restrictions, the fact that you can't land a fighter jet at a high school. But John's team had a killer comeback. If it was a joke, why did you put a specific price on it? 7 million points isn't random. That's a calculated offer. Then Pepsi tried to claim their commercial wasn't legally an offer, just an advertisement. John's lawyers demolished this with a British case from the 1890s, where a company had to pay up after making specific promises in their ads. The case dragged on for 3 years. Pepsi was so rattled they actually went back and re-edited their commercial, bumping the price to 700 million points and adding disclaimers. They were literally trying to change the evidence while the case was ongoing. In 1999, after 3 years of legal warfare, the federal judge ruled for Pepsi. The court's reasoning, no reasonable person would believe Pepsi was actually offering a military fighter jet. The judge called it zany humor and said the commercial was clearly meant to be funny. But here's the thing. John Leonard might have lost the case, but he absolutely won the war. First, this case is still taught in law schools today. John Leonard became legendary as the guy who sued Pepsi for a fighter jet. His name is in legal textbooks forever. Second, Pepsi's legal bills were astronomical. They spent way more defending this case than $700,000. Plus, the PR nightmare lasted for years. Every time someone mentions Pepsi Points, this story comes up. Third, and most importantly, John exposed how sloppy big corporations can be with their promises. Pepsi learned the hard way that even joke ads can have real consequences. This case changed everything about how companies advertise. Look at any promotion today. There's fine print everywhere. Disclaimers, limitations, legal language. That's all because of John Leonard. He proved that when corporations get careless with their marketing, someone's always watching. And some of those people are crazy enough to call their bluff. But the deeper story here is about corporate arrogance. Pepsi created a campaign without thinking through the legal implications. They assumed they could hide behind "it was just a joke" when someone took them seriously. John Leonard saw through that. He realized that billion-dollar companies aren't untouchable. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to hold them accountable. So did John Leonard scam Pepsi? He didn't get his fighter jet, but he did something better. He showed that corporate America isn't above the law and their marketing promises have consequences. Pepsi thought their fighter jet commercial was harmless fun. Instead, it became a 3-year legal nightmare that cost them millions and changed how every company writes their ads. The next time you see a commercial promising something incredible, remember John Leonard. Sometimes the biggest business opportunities are hiding in the most ridiculous places. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and a $23 million fighter jet is the courage to ask, "Are you serious about that offer?" Thanks for watching Business Vault. We'll see you next time with more corporate secrets and business scandals they don't want you to know about.